Hello, hello, everyone. How are you doing? Hi, Dorothy.
Happy Monday.
Yes, hopefully everyone had a wonderful weekend. It was absolutely gorgeous here in Asheville. And for those of you that turned your cameras on, thank you so much. For those of you that have not done that yet, we would love to invite you to turn your cameras on. There you are. Thank you. We'd love to see your beautiful faces. Perfect. Amazing. So, while we wait here for a couple of seconds to let everyone dial in, if you wouldn't mind just typing on the chat where you're dialing from. We always love seeing all the different places in the world where we have people joining us here in this beautiful community. And then while you're typing that, I would like to introduce you to Nishita. Nishita has done these webinars with me before. I love having her here because she's one of our practitioners up at SoHum. So Nishita, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Nishita, as Sandy was saying. It's so nice to be with y'all today. I am one of the practitioners up at SoHum. I am also a senior faculty member at the Ayurvedic Institute. And I love doing these. I love sharing everything about Ayurveda and yoga and food. So I'm honored to be here today, Sandy.
Thank you.
Yes.
She's an amazing cook as well. So if you ever have any questions about cooking Ayurvedically, I always love like going to Nishita's house and having her make some amazing dishes here for us. So I see that we have someone from Connecticut, someone from California. Thank you for putting in there where you're dialing from. As you know, I'm Sandy, and I'm your Ayurvedic ambassador at SoHum Mountain Healing Resort. And we do these webinars on a monthly basis just to deliver value to you. So if you ever have a specific topic that you would like for us to just talk about, just send us an email or put it right there in the chat. We'll be more than happy to add it to our content calendar. So today, we're going to be talking about this transition of the seasons. And as many of you know, typically from an Ayurvedic perspective, we do a seasonal cleanse. And it's not necessarily when the season is actually in the heat of it or happening, but it's actually during the transition of it. So that way you can kind of like get rid of any stagnated toxins from the prior season and cleanse yourself as you're going into the new season. So this time in particular that we are in the month of May, we're going to be transitioning from the Kapha season. And we will be talking about what does that mean for those of you that are like, Kapha, what is Kapha? So we're going to be transitioning from Kapha to the Pitta season. So why don't we go ahead and start there. Now, if you do have any questions throughout, feel free to post those questions on the chat for us. So Nishita, what is Kapha season?
What is Kapha season? I think Sandy and I are in the midst of Kapha
Oh my God.
season
Itchy,
with these
heaviness,
allergies.
like the whole thing, yeah.
We were just joking about this. So Kapha, from an Ayurvedic perspective, brings together the elements of water and earth. And when we think about these two elements, they're kind of like our heaviest element that exists, right? So all of Ayurveda is looking at the entire world, both us and everything from this desk to the sky to the food that we eat, from the perspective of the 5 elements. So ether, air, fire, water, and earth. Those then turn into various combinations to turn into what we call the doshas, which is what Sandy has been referring to as Kapha. So Kapha really governs kind of like winter into spring when we think about like cold, heavy, damp, sticky kind of qualities. So has anyone started to experience, depending where in the world you are, like a lot of like mucus draining, like, you know, where is this cough coming from? Where is like this like feeling of like, gosh, my appetite has been really off lately. Maybe there's like a general like just a little bit extra effort to like wake up in the mornings, and like it takes a little bit more effort and like a push to get going, and you kind of want to just like roll around in bed for a little bit longer, before you start your day. Well, all of these are aspects of Kapha kind of being at its peak. And the way we like to look at the seasons from an Ayurvedic perspective is at the beginning of the season, it's just like growing, right? It's like a little baby bud. But then by the end of the season, whatever dosha or principle is governing that season, it really is kind of at its like peak, right? And so winter into spring really brings about a lot of this like kapha-y energy. And especially with spring, because, just like in Mother Nature, right? Sandy and I live in Asheville, so we're surrounded by waterfalls and rivers and streams and things. And really now is where all the streams are like starting to like bustle, right? Like the ice has melted and things are like moving very quick. And in that same way, when we think about our physical body, a lot of things kind of condensed in the winter season, right? Which is natural process. But now with the heat, right, it's getting hot. I mean, it's going to be in the 80s this week, which personally I'm really excited for because I'm a summer girl through and through. But all of that heat has started to melt all of that condensed stuff, let's say, in the body, right? And because it's all melting, this is where we're starting to feel like there's like excess, just like gunk moving around in our system, right? And so what Sandy was talking about is, why do we really want to think about cleansing at the transition of the seasons? Well, we don't want to have to be right in the middle to then deal with it again. Does that make sense, y'all? So we really want to do it at the end of the season, so then we're like pushing out whatever was built up, and then we're preparing the body to bring in the qualities and the energy of the next season.
Beautifully said. Thank you so much for sharing that. Now, to continue to put things into perspective for you, so basically leaving Kapha season behind, what we want to do is to make sure that we get rid of the ama. In ama, it translates to toxins. So in every season, we accumulate toxins from the property of that season. And the whole purpose of doing the cleanse is to make sure that you're transitioning and you're cleansing as you go from one season to the other. Now, oftentimes we hear this a lot. Like now when you begin to learn about the doshas, people say, well, I am Kapha, or I am Pitta. And just to clarify that and to put it into perspective, it doesn't really mean that you are that dosha. We have all three doshas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. And it's just a matter of how much of them do we have in our own constitution. We're friends, we live in the same city, we love the same food, but we're totally different human beings. And that means that she has her own constitution, I have my own constitution, and depending on that, I may feel some things more than her, or vice versa. So it doesn't really mean that you are Kapha as such. It just means that you may have something out of balance that is creating the constitution of Vata, Pitta, or Kapha to be more prominent. Do you want to add anything about that? Because I find that that's often the question that I hear from people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's one thing to keep in mind is, remember, the 5 elements, if you kind of really go back to simplicity's sake, everything is the 5 elements. So if you were only one dosha, that inherently means you're going to be leaving out certain elements and you wouldn't be able to exist. Like you wouldn't be in being form if you didn't have all 5 of the elements. Now, the one thing that I want to highlight to what Sandy was saying is that the way the doshas manifest within all of us are going to be very different, right? But that doesn't mean kind of like this outward layer of the environment and Mother Nature doesn't impact us. It's just going to impact us very differently, right? So even though we're in Kapha season, Sandy and I have 2 different constitutions. The way that Kapha layer comes into me versus into Sandy versus into Dorothy may be slightly different, all based off of what, again, our baseline constitution is.
Exactly. Now, another key component about these transitions is also connecting with nature. So what is the premises of having actually these 5 elements within the Vata, Pitta, Kapha? Is for us to also learn how to be and live in harmony with nature. So when we see certain elements in nature and we see the temperature changing and we see the seasons, the seasonality changing, is how are we adjusting our body, but it's also our mind and our soul. Because each of these properties is not only like, oh, do they feel heavy or do they feel airy or do they feel the fire, but it's also how does it feel up here in our mind. So can you describe just in the mind, like what does Kapha look like in case that any of you are feeling that represented in your day-to-day life right now as we are transitioning?
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to first talk about Kapha and its like balanced state, because I will say sometimes Kapha gets like a bad rap because it is like, you know, the heaviest of elements. But remember, without Kapha, we wouldn't have endurance. Okay, so the example I like to give to our students at the Institute is that if you really wanted to accomplish something in life, the mental side of it, absolutely, from like the fire is going to be there, but you wouldn't actually have the endurance to wake up every single day and do the things you needed to do. Like that sheer momentum of needing to do and go out and do something comes from Kapha, right? So sometimes a lot of the things that we aim for require a lot of like what we would consider mundaneness, right? Like, you know, I love my job, but I still got to do paperwork, right? Like I can't get away from it, not in a negative way, but it's just part and parcel of everything that I do, right? But the ability to come in and actually like move through the stuff that may not be like the most like incredible part of our existence, right? That wouldn't be there without the Kapha. The Kapha is the one that kind of gives us that like oomph to like get going, but then keep going. So I want to like really emphasize that like keep aspect of it, right? So being able to do our daily routine, being able to do our practices, right? That discipline really comes from like the Kapha element. So that's kind of like Kapha in its most like balanced state. Okay. Now, in that same vein, Kapha people who have more Kapha, you know, in their energies are like your best friends. Okay. They're not going to leave. They're the most loyal individuals, and they like believe in the best in everyone, right? So they're not ones to point out flaws. They're not ones to like, you know, be critical of individuals. They're going to be like your anchor and your rock through life, which I think we all need, right? If we didn't have Kapha in our beings, then gosh, we would just be like very critical people, I feel like, right? But then what ends up happening, again, the season comes in, and again, it's Kapha, it's wet, it's heavy, it's dull, it's dense, right? That same grounding energy that we need that keeps us steady and that keeps us like going day in and day out, too much of it can turn into like an inability to move then, right? So this like aspect of like feeling really lethargic, this aspect of like almost like being okay with not doing at the same time, right? And there are times when we all need this, right? There's no doubt about it. We've been going, and then some days you just literally need to roll around in bed for 7 hours, right? But we can't do that every single day. So this like heaviness, this lethargy, this just like this dull quality, you know, maybe even a little bit of like having a hard time making decisions because you're just like, you can't cut through. Like there's so much kind of like mucus, wet, dampness where it's really creating a veil to be able to like, okay, what do I need to do right now?
Yeah. So hopefully that brings a little bit of clarity with regards to what does it feel like in the body, but what does it do in our minds? And also the beauty of what actually Kapha looks like when it's, you know, actually at its best. Now, we did get a question here from Varen. Is Kapha means mucus?
Not necessarily. I think mucus, let me rephrase that. Mucus is very kaphagenic in nature, okay? However, it is not mucus in and of itself. Kapha is anything that is building. So our muscle, our bones, our fat, like anything that kind of provides lubrication, all of our mucosal linings in the body, all of that is going to be, is Kapha. So I don't want to just narrow it down to one thing, it actually serves a very critical role. Like I like to tell people, like if we didn't have kapha, then like I wouldn't have structure to my body, and then we would all just be like goopy messes, like, you know, like little like blobs on the floor.
That's right. And actually, even a visual representation for this would be, and this is how I actually learn about Vata, Pitta, Kapha in relationship to the human body, is Kapha is, if you will, your foundation and the walls of a house. So this is the heavy structure. This is what keeps the home alive, like it's just built in, right? And it's also very grounding. But then you think about perhaps, you know, Vata is the air that goes all the way through the house if you open the windows, right? And then Pitta, you have everything that goes through those pipes and anything that is moving, right, through it, but it's also very, very fiery, if you will. So hopefully that gave you a visual representation of it. Now, the idea is then to connect with our own selves and identify when are we feeling that kapha buildup, so that way we can go into the Pitta season. So why is it so important to do a cleanse during a transition?
Great question. So the big thing is that think of the season as like cumulative energy, okay? So as we were going through winter and now into spring, we're really at the peak of feeling this kapha-ness. And, you know, I was joking before, like, gosh, me and Sandy are in the pits of it with like allergies and like runny noses and all of these things, right? And what we want to do is we want to kind of create like a clean slate, right? If we look at Mother Nature, which, you know, she really is like the ultimate, like, how should we move throughout life, you know, throughout the year? Like, there's this energy of like letting go of what that season gave us, and then preparing the body, preparing the mind, preparing her like soil for the next season and what's to come, right? And so in that same vein, we do cleanses, you know, traditionally at the transition, because we want to kind of like step into this next phase, right? And when we think of summer, like, what is summer? It's like being outside, it's, you know, being in the sun, going to the beach. It's like kind of like the peak of the year when it comes to like our outward expression, you know, like you want to be hanging out with friends. You don't want to come home until 10 o'clock. You want to like, you know, eat lunch outside. You want to go on vacation. You want to do all of these things. But think about if you just had all of this heavy energy that was just stuck inside, then in the summer, that heat would kind of make everything very unbearable, right? Because you still have all of this like clogged gunkness, you know, if you will, inside of the body. And so when you kind of are wanting to be outside, you like don't have the excitement to, right? Or you don't have the energy to, because you're just like blowing your nose all day, right? And so in that same reason, we want to kind of move everything out that got built up, so that way we can also enjoy summer, right? And in the same way, we would do this for all the other seasons, because each season has all these incredible gifts to give us. But if we haven't prepared what I like to call the soil, right? The soil is our body and our mind, then we have a tough time kind of receiving whatever that season is meant to be giving us.
100%. So now you know what you will be feeling like if you do not cleanse yourself. And you know, I don't think like a lot of us were taught as we were growing up, like there was the necessity to actually cleanse as we were transitioning, so that way we can connect with nature and the changes in nature. And obviously it really depends on where you're located. Like the seasonality where you're at may be different than where we are at now. For example, some places in South America or some places in Europe. So the idea is not just to follow whatever the seasonality that we're going through here, but actually to pay attention to where you are. What does the seasons look like where you are, specifically to your location? So that way you can adapt properly. Now, you already know now what kapha means, what it means to do the cleanse in order for you to be able to transition effectively, making sure that you're getting rid of all of those toxins as you're moving into the new season. Now, let's talk about Pitta. What does Pitta look like? And let's talk about the mind, the body, and the soul.
Absolutely. So Pitta is going to be our fire and water, okay? So really represented mostly by that fire element, so everything about transformation. So Pitta actually is quite opposite in many ways of qualitatively of Kapha, right? So whereas Kapha is heavy, which we need, Pitta is very light. Kapha is cold, Pitta is very hot. So when you think of like that fire, right? Think of all the qualities of fire. It's sharp, it's intense. You know, this is why, like, again, at the peak of summer, we're all kind of like in the fatigue of it as well, right? Okay, we're ready for like the cool weather to come in. So, you know, again, similarly from that physical body perspective, Pitta in balance gives us drive, it gives us energy, it gives us like that passion, that zeal, it gives us all of the like desires to go and do, right? So it's kind of like this inert force. But then out of balance, right, Pitta can turn into things that are like very intense, right? So discernment turns into criticism, right? Or, you know, getting kind of like irritated at the littlest things, right? Someone didn't put a jacket up. This can also manifest physically as like heartburn. It can manifest as like, you know, rashes. It can manifest as like excessive sweating, like just feeling flushed all the time. So whenever you think of kind of like this heat spreading throughout the body, for many people it can also manifest as like nausea, very loose stool, you know, so you're kind of like everything's really melting, you know, like very hot, right? And your body's just trying to release this heat in any way that it can.
Yeah. So things like rosacea. A lot of people are like, why am I having rosacea? There you have it. You're getting that pitta going on, right? The same with heartburn. You know, it's very common, especially in men, feeling that heartburn, just making sure that you're paying attention to those signals. So what's happening is your body is literally talking to you. It's telling you, I have a little too much of this. And then the idea is to always know that opposite balance and like increases like. So let's say that now that we're going into the Pitta season, what are some of the things that people should try to avoid, not to agitate the Pitta?
Excellent question. So I think in general, when we think about anything that really overheats us, right? So again, like increases like. So if Pitta is high and we're like, let me go stand outside in 90-degree weather at noon when the sun is at its highest point.
And have tacos with hot sauce.
With the hot sauce, right? And you're like, man, I could eat like 25 habanero peppers. Like,
right.
Heat is going to increase, right? So how do we use the opposites to balance? So, you know, this is like, okay, you want to enjoy outside, sit in the shade, right? Or you want to be outside, go find a beautiful tree. Like a tree is very earthy, right? It's going to give you that, like, again, that cool quality to it. This is why people should go to the beach in the summertime, because you can be in the water. Water is excellent to balance out the intensity of fire. You know, being mindful of exactly what Sandy was saying, like, this isn't the season to be like, you know, being in like what are those like pepper challenges, Sandy, right?
Yes.
Like, how hot can you handle? Like, not the season to do that. Do that in the winter season, right? You know, think about like cooling things like hibiscus and rose and cucumbers. And, you know, it's my favorite season, salad season, right?
Ooh.
So, you know, eating really like crunchy, lively, green kind of things.
Yes, and salads are really good. And granted, not all salads are good for everyone. It really depends on your digestion. But one thing that I love during the summertime is like this watermelon salad with goat cheese, and you can put maybe some red onions very thinly sliced, and it's refreshing. You can put macadamia nuts and mint, and all of those elements are kind of like cooling, if you will. And you can make also a citrus salad, or just really looking at eating things. You can have a gazpacho instead of like a hot, you know, soup, something more cooling, if you will. Now, you now understand, hopefully, fully what Kapha looks like, what Pitta looks like in that transition. And I wanted to make sure that for anyone that has questions, because it does feel differently for everyone. So if you do have questions, make sure that you post them on the chat, because you have our undivided attention right now, and we're happy to answer those questions for you. Now, what does a cleanse look like going from Kapha season to a Pitta season. Is it different than any other regular cleanse? Because we do our online cleanses as well as the Panchakarma at SoHum. And we'll go into a little bit more detail in just a second, but is the one this time of the year very specific? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So I would say fundamentally, all of the cleanses have the basic structure. What we're attempting to do is oiliate the body to bring all the toxins back into the GI tract. And there are various different actions that we do to help essentially pull all of the ama, right, that Sandy was mentioning, those toxins, out of the system. Now, the thing that really differentiates, season to season is, more nuanced aspects of like what herbs are we going to use, what kind of different supplement support are we going to use. When we do the oiliation, this is like you're taking in ghee, in the beginning to help pull, what kind of ghee are we going to use. Oftentimes we also focus on like various organs, right? So in the, spring season, the lungs tend to be a really big seat of kapha. And so some of the things that we're going to use will help to target the lungs in particular to help really cleanse the lungs out, or like the stomach. The stomach is another big seat of kapha. So we kind of like modify, I guess, for lack of better words, or like create very specific aspects of how to use the foundation to target the various parts of the body through herbs, through the different foods and different kinds of like oils that we're going to use both internally and externally to support that specific dosha to leave.
Nice. And I would love to get some of those specific herbs. Let's go ahead and share that. But before we go into that, one of the things that we do with our cleanses is we activate our acne, which is our digestion. And we typically do that with ginger. Now, since we're going into the Pitta season and ginger is heating, do we do something different, or do we still do the ginger?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one cool thing that I love about Ayurveda is that foods in different forms actually change the properties of it. So one thing, for example, is that ginger that is fresh, right? So like fresh ginger actually is okay for Pitta because it's not as heating, but dry ginger powder can be really intense for Pitta. Okay. So if we break that down just a little bit, right? When we look at back to the elements, right? The water aspect actually gives a little bit of a cooling nature to anything that we're eating. So because fresh ginger is very juicy, right, it still has a little bit of that water, so it won't be as intense versus like
powder. Dry
powder, there's like zero water left in it, right? So anything that would be cooling has been pulled out of that substance essentially. So ginger is still great, but what we do, Sandy, is we actually squeeze some lime juice on it, and lime is actually cooling as well. So this doesn't mean that, Pitta people should be eating like pounds of ginger pickle.
That would be me.
There's still a little bit of heat to it, but you won't feel as much of it as you would if you were to like drink like ginger powder tea or something like that.
Nice, nice. So like in any cleanse, we always start by activating our digestion. So if you feel like your digestion has been a little bit slow, you're coming from the kapha, you are not feeling really hungry, you're eating just because you're accustomed to eating at whatever time of the day, just make sure that you start there by just taking, like Nishita said, take your fresh ginger. You can actually peel it and peel very thin slices. And I love the idea of squeezing either lime or lemon, maybe even a pinch of salt to get that watery substance from the ginger. And then just put one little thing in your mouth and activate that digestion until you're really hungry. So now, can you give us some tips on herbs that are really supportive in these times?
Yeah, totally. So specifically, again, into this like kapha season, so kind of our basic kitchen herbs, I like to go there first because we all have some of these that are just laying around, okay? So ginger obviously is really great. It's great for digestion. It's gonna get everything going. Turmeric also is excellent, whether it's in dried or fresh form. One little thing, Sandy, that I like to do when I can find fresh fresh turmeric, which isn't the easiest thing, but I also will just like peel it and put a little lime juice. So I'll do a little bit of ginger and turmeric.
Ooh.
So for our Pitta friends, the turmeric helps to cool it down a little bit. So you can do a little
Nice.
combination of both, but dried turmeric is equally as great. Peppermint right now actually is excellent as well. There's like a little bit of like a heat to it without it being overly heating. Cumin, again, has a little bit of heat, but not the intensity. Fennel is actually, you know, kind of like a underrated herb, like fennel and coriander, because there's a little bit of like warmth to it, but it's not going to take you over. But there's a wonderful tea, which you guys may have heard of, cumin, coriander, fennel tea, kind of like a staple in Ayurveda. And drinking this tea like 3 to 4 times a day actually helps to pull excess water out of the system. So again, if we think about like kapha being like water and earth, right? If we're feeling a little bit of like water retention, or again, this just like kind of sticky quality, it'll help to kind of melt some of that sticky quality without, you know, like making us feel like we just had like a pound of ginger, you know. So that's a really a really great one. And then some Ayurvedic herbs that are really awesome. There's an herb called pipali. It is related to black pepper. I think the technical name is Piper longum. That one is excellent because it has a direct affinity to the lung, so it's really going to help pull any excess kapha out. Black pepper also has another affinity to the lungs as well. So, you know, for me this time of year, I do like a little black pepper, maybe like the tiniest bit of like cinnamon bark. Cinnamon's really great for circulation, just to get things moving. And then I'll put in like some fennel, and I'll make a little tea, like black pepper, fennel, and cinnamon tea, which will help to kind of pull things out but regulate the system. And then I think another one which we often forget about, in this lens I should say, tulsi. Tulsi is really great for the lungs in particular and the heart. And so if there's any kind of like stagnation, it really helps to move that stagnation. So I would say like those are some of like my go-tos, and very easy to find all of these, whether it's at your grocery store all the way to, you know, the Ayurvedic Institute, Banyan Botanicals, you know, we have all of these.
Love it. And I saw a lot of faces going like this as you were going over the list. And I saw a lot of people writing down. Thank you for that. Yeah. Hopefully that was helpful. For the CCFT, you know, you can make it at home, and you probably are familiar with Banyan Botanicals, and Banyan Botanicals is our sister company. So you are more than welcome to take a look at their website. They have incredible products. They're all organic, grown at our farm, their farm in Oregon, and they distribute anywhere here within the United States. So feel free to check them out. Beautiful. So I wanted to mention about the cleanse and Panchakarma, because these are the two things that they're staple to us in Ayurveda. And these are the things that we do obviously at the change of every season, but particularly Panchakarma, you can do any time of the year. I have guests that come to SoHum that usually they begin to ask like, when is the best time that I can go? And I usually turn that question back to them as to, how are you feeling right now? That should be what drives your decision as to when is the best time to do either a cleanse or a Panchakarma. Because you can be waiting for the perfect transition of the season, but if you're not feeling well right here, right now, your time to do it is right here, right now. So for the cleanse actually already started. I don't think people can join last minute.
It's a little tough.
It's a little late already, right? Yeah. Yeah. But you have Panchakarma, and Panchakarma is our 7-day detox from SoHum Mountain Healing Resort right here in Asheville, North Carolina, in the middle of the Blue Ridge Mountains. And literally you get our undivided attention is personalized to your own needs. And we do it every week of the year from Sunday to Sunday. There are people that come here for 15 days, for 21 days, and you're getting the daily Ayurvedic treatments, Abhyanga, Swetna, Shirodhara. You have amazing food that is dedicated specifically to help you with the detoxification process. And we also have daily activities all throughout. So Chris, if you wouldn't mind just sharing that that feel free to scan that you have on the screen if you're wanting to learn more. That's what we're here for. We're happy to have a call. It's for free. And we can just talk for a full hour about what a Panchakarma would look like for you. What are the things that you're struggling with that you need assistance with? We can help you define your goals. And then obviously we can look for the best time of the year for you to come. So moving along, now, can you tell us what are some of the movements that will be good in this transition? Because it's not only about what we eat and what we feel here in the mind, but it's also movement. And Nishita is a yoga teacher as well. So what are some of the moves that can help us clear the Kapha and go into the Pitta season?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So remember again, Kapha is dull, stagnant, heavy, okay? So movement in general, okay, is going to be huge to kind of get over this hump of like, I don't want to do anything.
Yeah.
Exactly. So my biggest thing that I recommend to folks is try to go out for a walk first thing in the morning, okay? Like get that fresh sun as soon as you wake up. Don't even think about it. You know, sometimes I have to do this to myself. It's just like count to 5 and then like make the decision to get out of bed, right? So I do a little countdown. I give myself a little like cheerleader pep talk in my brain and I'm like, get out of the door and just go, okay? So going for walks is a huge one. The next thing that I really recommend is breathing practices, right? So pranayama actually is one of the best things we can do for Kapha, and pranayama is just literally like breath practice, right? From like a very traditional yogic perspective. And again, prana, breath, lungs, Kapha, right? So we're really gonna help to move all of that excess Kapha. So some of my favorite breathing practices to do are things like Bhastrika, which is bellows breath. This is like a forceful inhale and a forceful exhale. Doing forceful alternate nostril breathing. Again, not like a gentle one, but one that's very intense. Like think about like invigorating the body. I also like doing Kapalabhati or breath of fire or skull shining breath. You may have heard that one. That one in particular really works into Agni, which I think is important to just kind of build that like stamina, that metabolism back up, right? Everything has kind of like shut down for this season and we need to start waking things up to get it going. I also like doing bee's breath. I think this one is forgotten for Kapha because you don't feel like, oh, it's so intense, but it's like this subtle vibration, right? So, you know, like vibration plates are so popular right now. I'm sure everyone's like heard of them or seen them. But Brahmari is like our traditional non-plate needed like vibration plate. So you do this bee's breath, you take a big inhale and then you hum really loudly on the exhale. So it really targets like this kind of like latent energy that has been stuck. And so you're humming and that hum creates a vibration that kind of shakes everything up, which is really great. And then moving into some like yoga practices, Sandy, I think, you know, very foundational, like Surya Namaskar, sun salutations. I mean, that literally is bringing in the quality of the sun, right? And again, sun is like waking up in the summer season, right? So this is really powerful practice. You know, my teacher, Dr. Ladd, he says that if all you were to do from like a physical movement perspective is walk, do your pranayama and do Surya Namaskar, like you're complete. You don't need too much more to keep the body nice and vibrant. But think about like your, you know, classes, you know, your yoga classes that invite like more like rapid dynamic movement, right? So your warrior series are really great. The chair poses are really great, right? You want to think about building heat, right? This isn't necessarily the time to go to like 7 restorative classes a week, right? You want to get the body moving to get all that Kapha going. Yeah, beautiful, excellent. Hopefully that gave you some ideas. And to the bee breath, just think about sound healing. Literally, that's exactly what you're doing inside of your body. So the sound healing, you have the bowl outside and actually that vibration is working through the healing and the vibration of it is what is actually helping us heal. But this time you're actually doing internally in that vibration within your body. Like literally you can cover your ears and
and you feel it all the way through your stomach, your lungs, your throat, even up in your head. And it's also really good to clear the mind. If you're feeling like your mind is congested, that you're actually feeling the mind heavy, or you're having a lot of repetitive thoughts, just doing this will break that sequence of having repetitive thoughts that may not be beneficial for you because you're kind of feeling stagnated, that kapha stagnation of just repeating that thought and just going over and over again in your mind. Just do that exercise and it will literally just release you from it because you're healing from the inside out. So those were great recommendations, thank you. Because it is important to think about not only how do we heal the body from what we eat and the herbs that we're using, but how do we do with movement. Now let's talk about sleep.
Oh yes.
So what does sleep look like during the kapha season and into the pitta season? So that way we can ensure that we're touching all the different points that are key for a successful transition.
Absolutely. So, you know, this was a little bit tricky, Sandy, okay? Because it's not to say that we don't need to sleep. We need to sleep, okay? But I will say probably beyond anything specific is good sleep hygiene, okay? So getting to bed on time. And then in the kapha season, this is not the time where we want to sleep in, okay? So it's kind of like having to fight this like inner voice of like, no, just, you know, stay in bed for an extra 2 hours, right?
Extra 2 hours.
Fight that I definitely have in kapha season
For
sure. But this is the time where, you know, if you can get up like right before the sun rises or as the sun is rising, then you're really gonna bring in, again, that like movement energy, right? And we want kapha to get moving. We don't want it to get stuck and sticky and then lead to stagnation, right? So I would think about making sure you're setting yourself up for success, you know, prior to going to bed, right? So basic things like turn your screens off an hour before, right? Think about what kinds of activities are you doing. You know, one thing I always tell my clients is, you know, even like, you know, watching something, even if it's not right before bed, but are you watching like an action film that has like, you're on the edge of your seat, right? Like, where's your mind? Like, you're riling yourself up, right? You know, and I laugh, you know, like my sister-in-law, she's always like telling her husband, like, you know, you need to calm the kids down before bed, not get them excited and like do like roughhousing and stuff. And I'm like, that pertains to adults as well. You know, like our version of roughhousing is watching like all these crazy things like right before bed, or like listening to like loud music, or even like the kinds of books that you read, right? Like we've all read that book where we can't put it down and like we can't go to sleep then, right? Because you're just like, what's gonna happen next? What's gonna happen next? So my favorite tip from Dr. Ladd, Sandy, is he literally tells people to read a dictionary, because it's so like, it lulls you, right? Like there's no like brain activity that's like, oh, what's the next definition, right? Like you literally are like decompressing the whole body. So I really encourage folks to think about what are you doing before bed, and then do everything you can to wake up as soon as the sun starts to rise. So blackout curtains are great, but then also like I'm not a huge fan of them because I can naturally wake up with the sun. So I always leave like a tiny little peak open, just so I get some of that like sunlight as soon as the sun is rising. You know, my body naturally wakes up.
Amazing. And think circadian rhythm. Like literally you want to connect to you want to activate your circadian rhythm. And the best way to do that is first thing in the morning, just open those curtains, make sure that if you can, you're staring at the sun for a few minutes. And actually this is really good to help with your cortisol levels, to help you actually get sleepy earlier in the day, to wake up earlier in the morning just naturally without even having an alarm clock. Because now your body, basically you're feeding your brain and your system with it. We got a question here from Jim. And Jim, I'm glad you asked. Thank you so much. Can we demo the bee breath?
Yeah,
let's go ahead and do it real quick.
So the way Dr. Ladd likes to teach it is you're gonna take your thumbs to your ear flaps, okay, or your traguses. The index finger comes to the center of the forehead. The middle finger comes to the corner of the eyes, and then let the ring and pinky fall down wherever it can, okay? You're gonna tuck the chin down just a tiny little bit. We're gonna take a big inhale in, and on the exhale, I want you guys to hum as loud as you can. So we'll go here, big inhale, and hum. Let's do one more big inhale. Keep your eyes closed, release the hands, just observe. You may even notice that some of these vibrations are carrying on. Good, and then you can slowly open the eyes. Kind of like charges you up. It's like your own little like plug-in.
We get a heart from Jim. Thank you. One thing that I would love to invite you to do after, like give it a try, but putting your thumbs on your ears and blocking it, but then try doing it without it, and you'll see the efficacy of it when you do have your thumbs blocking it, because you actually feel that vibration a lot deeper than when you don't have them in there. So just play around with it, have fun with it, right? Beautiful. All right, so we talked about sleep, we talked about movement. How about nutrition from the aspect of what are some of the foods that people should actually be eating that are going to help? Because we talked about the heat, not having the heat, especially actually, and also let's talk about the day, the time of the day. Because usually when you eat in the middle of the day, that's when Pitta is the highest, and that is when you're going to be burning. But if you're someone that is eating, let's say, at 3 in the afternoon, your lunch, because you had a busy day, how does that impact? So give us some examples of some foods that will be helpful and when to eat them.
Absolutely. So I would say one of the first things, as Sandy was saying, is do your best to eat your biggest meal right in the middle of the day. Okay, so I would say anywhere from like 11 to 2-ish. Okay, that's like a pretty good gap if you are able to. Think about what happens outside. Okay, like if the sun is at its highest point around that time, that means that our digestion, the inner sun, is going to be at its highest point inside of our body as well. And that's why we want to eat our biggest, heaviest meals then, right? So think about, you know, not just like the quantity of food, but the quality. So our proteins really should be eaten at this time. The dairy should be eaten at this time, right? Things that are a little bit tougher to digest. Then moving into like breakfast and lunch. Now breakfast, I'll say, like if you have hunger, eat a little bit, but don't force yourself to eat breakfast if you're not hungry, okay? I think this is like the biggest rule in Ayurveda, that only eat when you are hungry. Now, if you are someone that needs breakfast and you don't have the appetite, doing something like the ginger pickle or warm water with lemon in the morning, you know, first thing really helps to kind of get the digestion going, so that way you can kind of build appetite, but just be mindful of that, right? And then in the evening, you want to think about something very simple, okay, like basic stir-fry veggies, a soup, even just like a plain glass of milk, like warmed up on the stove with some good spices, maybe just having a handful of nuts, or, you know, just something very light, like a broth is really great, you know, like a fried rice is really great, but not the time to want to do like our heavy proteins, right? Think more like easy to digest kinds of foods. But in general, like kind of thematically throughout this whole season, for any of the meals, you want to think about foods that have a little bit of like bitterness to it, okay? So I'm talking like your green vegetables, I'm talking your leafy greens. You want to think about lighter foods. So again, the good time now is to transition. If you eat meat, like red meat is really great for like winter, but now we want to move into more of like our leaner meats, and even into like fish and things like that, right? Things that are really easier to digest. You want to think about adding a little bit of warmth, okay? So this doesn't mean that we need to have like very hot food from like, not temperature, but again, we're not wanting to necessarily eat a lot of like habanero peppers, right? But how are we spicing our food well to support digestion, right? So think about your basil, think about like your oregano, your thyme, right? There's just like the tiniest bit of pungency in that to help keep everything nice and digested. And then you also want to think about foods that kind of create this like drying quality, if you will. The technical term is astringency, but these are things that kind of help to like suck up excess moisture, right? So quinoa, not eating like an overripe avocado, but right at its peak, there's a little bit of astringency. Maybe you want to incorporate like, you know, a quarter glass of pomegranate juice in the afternoons. That's going to kind of like create this like drying up. And again, a lot of our cruciferous veggies, right? The broccoli, the Brussels, the kale, all of those kinds of things have like a nice like astringency to it. So not only are they bitter to help balance and cleanse, right? Bitters are actually one of the most important flavor and taste to move things out of the system. But again, they also have a little bit of this drying quality to kind of like suck everything up. So that way we don't just have like, again, this excess water and sticky quality.
For sure. And we do teach about the 6 tastes of Ayurveda. If you haven't heard about it, it's something really good to get familiar with, because it is important that you have all those 6 tastes within your meal. Like Nishita was saying, that bitterness, like sometimes we just don't like it, but it does really help with the cleansing. So just thinking through how can you integrate the 6 tastes into your meal. And also an Ayurveda dish, actually when you look at it, it's very colorful too, it's fun. So this is spring, is the time to be planting and to be growing. So if you're into gardening, just growing your own herbs and making sure that you go out there and you bring them back in and you're having fun with them as well. So we're getting here towards the end of this one live webinar with all of you, and I wanted to make sure that we talk on this about the spiritual side of things. In this transition, you know, how does that look like spiritually? Like, how do we typically feel? And then how are some beautiful ways that we can then go into the Pitta season where we're feeling that openness of the heart? And what are some of the practices you would recommend?
So, you know, spring is really beautiful because there's a lot of like energy of renewal, right? And so this really is the time, like right now, if you feel like, man, I didn't really get to start my, you know, like resolutions and things like that, right? My practices, like this is really the time to get going on that. You know, whether it's I'm going to wake up and I'm just going to like watch the sunrise, right? Or I'm going to do my gratitude journal, or I'm going to do my like 5 minutes of meditation, whatever it may be. Like now is the time to start doing all of these things, right? Because by the time summer comes around, we want this habit to have already been instilled in the body. So then it's just like your body's on auto drive, and then you can enjoy everything that summer gives us. So, you know, really from like the spiritual place from the spring season, like this is the time to figure out and start, I should say, not just figure out, but go and do it, right? So do all the things that fill your cup and that really give you that like that boost of like, man, I am so much more than my job. I'm so much more than just like this one role that I play, right? So, you know, it's very often or very easy for people to kind of get stuck in like, I'm like literally my whole life is about being a mom, right? Or my whole life is about being like an employee, or my whole life is about being, you know, a caregiver, a child, a daughter, whatever it may be. But how do we like really open ourselves up to like everything that we are, right? Like you are so much more than just like that one tiny facet that we give ourselves credit for. And so right now is the time to start doing the things that allow for that openness, right? For us to be able to see everything that we are like in perfect divinity. And so I would say like find that thing and like don't even question it, just go out and do it, right? So, you know, give yourself that 5-second countdown, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and just go.
Go. Yeah, literally, if you think about it, the Kapha season is the time of reflection. Why do you think, you know, most of us ended up trying to hibernate? That is why. And it's not in a negative way. It's actually that time that you're reflecting, you're looking at the past, you're assessing the future. So now this is the time where everything is awakening, everything is coming back to life. So any reflections that you did during your Kapha season, just make sure if you were able to write it down and you were journaling, now, like Nishita said, come into the execution mode, it's also a very creative time. It's creative and creation is the same, because we are going into the springtime season, going into the summer. So think about your solar plexus. When you think about the chakras, the root chakra is more so that Kapha. Now we're going up in the chakras. So think creativity, sensuality, all those things that begin to activate. You know, if you're thinking about maybe taking dance lessons or learning how to sing or paint, this is the best time. Just go ahead and go for it, like Nishita said.
Yeah.
So hopefully we were able to cover all the bases around this transition. Let me open it up for questions real quick and see, does anyone have any questions whatsoever? Feel free to raise your hands, unmute, or you can type it on the chat, whatever feels most comfortable to you.
I just have gratitude for the support of remembering all of the details of making this transition. And it's very, very important. And I'm so grateful. Yay.
Thank you, Dorothy. We appreciate you. Thank you for attending and taking the time from your schedule. Anyone else? Well, then this is a reminder that we meet here once a month, every single month, and the agenda is just to bring value to you. That's all. So if you do have any topics that you want us to address, remember to send it to us. And other than that, we look forward to seeing you again next month. Just go on the SoHum website under About and Events, and you can see the upcoming webinars that we're going to have from now until the end of the year. And we look forward to seeing you again. We hope you have a beautiful week. Namaste.